Now, if you're creating a Rails application, oftentimes you'll also need to handle some kind of recurring process or task, such as rolling log files every hour, or restarting a daemon process once a week, or maybe clearing some old cache files every day. And to handle recurring tasks, the most common solution is to use cron, which is available in most Unix systems. And so let's say we're on a production server here and we want to create a new cron task to run some kind of rake task every morning. So what you might do is just do cron tab -e. Now, I don't know about you, but that's usually as far as I can get without having to look something up on the internet, because I don't use cron every day and I always forget the syntax for it. So let's say 2:30 every morning we want to do something, so I think it's the minute, then the hour, and then 3 other placements, and then you can type in your command you want to do. So you would like cd into your Rails directory and then run rake or something like that. But this is kind of difficult to remember the syntax, and you have to test it and make sure you got it right and so on. Another problem with this is that every time you want to change this, you have to log into your production machine, and this is also an external dependency to go along with your Rails application. So every time you deploy your Rails application to a new server, then you have to remember to include the cron files and so on. It's just something else you have to remember to go along with your Rails application. Wouldn't it be nice if this could all be handled automatically for you? Well, I encourage you to check out this little gem called Whenever. This is a way to write cron jobs through Ruby. So you get a nice Ruby syntax that is very readable and easy to remember. Here's an example of what it would look like. So you could say every 3 hours, you could execute a bit of Ruby code, you could run a rake task, or just execute some external command. And like I said, the syntax is really readable and easy to remember, so you don't have to look up extra documentation. And it handles all the dirty work behind the scenes of moving into your Rails directory and executing the rake task in production environment and so on. Another nice thing about this is that it ties these cron jobs into your Rails application, so you manage them from there. You don't have to log into your production server. If you're managing multiple Rails applications in one server, it keeps it nice and tidy because each job is just tied to that one application. And if you're deploying to a brand new server, you don't have to remember to install the cron tabs manually. They're automatically included with the application. So now to get this set up, you just have to go into your environment.rb file. Let's add a line in here, just setting that we want to install this gem and use it. Now this line is not strictly required, but I very much encourage it, so that way you're just setting some kind of dependency in your Rails application that you make sure that the Whenever gem is installed on your system when you're deploying your application. Then we could ensure that we have that gem installed with rake gems install. And then you simply call wheneverize, then pass in the path, which is just the current directory. And all this does is just create a schedule.rb file in your config directory, so that this is the place you're going to add the code to handle the cron jobs. And here's what that generated schedule file looks like. As you can see, we have some nice examples in here we can go by, but I'll just start from scratch here. Now let's say I'm using the excellent Thinking Sphinx plugin to manage the searching for this application, but I need to update the index on a recurring basis. So let's say every 2 hours I want to update the index. I could just call every 2 hours and then just execute the rake task called Thinking Sphinx index. And that way it'll update our Thinking Sphinx index every 2 hours once we deploy this application, because it will create the proper cron jobs to do so. Now you can also have some keywords in here as well instead of a time. So every reboot, for example, you might want to start Thinking Sphinx. So Thinking Sphinx start. And there we go. That's all that takes. So now whenever we start our server up, it'll read that cron task to say we need to execute that rake task. Now let's say our cache file sizes are getting a little bit out of control and we want to clear our cache folder every Friday morning at 4 a.m. So we could say every Friday at 4 a.m. and then we want to run a command to just remove our temporary cache files. So that'll just remove that directory, and there we go. Now it'll run that command every Friday morning. Now you can add additional commands in the single time block. So we can add, other rake tasks in here, or we can also call runner to execute just some kind of string of Ruby code. And we might do this to maybe remove some abandoned records from the database. So let's say we have abandoned records in our carts table, and we want to just remove those. So let's say we have a class method on cart called remove abandoned, and then that'll just execute that also at Friday morning at 4 a.m. So now how do we take that Ruby code and turn it into cron jobs? Well, you could just call whenever while inside your Rails app directory, and then just call update cron tab, and then pass in some kind of identifier string for your application. I'll just call this store. So this is important so it knows what to update when you change that file. And this will generate the cron tab, and then we can see it right here. So as you can see, on reboot, we'll run Thinking Sphinx start. Every Friday morning at 4, we'll do those, and then update the index every 2 hours. Pretty cool. This properly handles changes made as well, so we can change this to Saturday morning if we want at 4:38 a.m. and then run those commands again. So we can see now those two tasks run on Saturday morning. Now you likely want to update your cron tab every time you deploy your application so it updates it on the production server. So all you have to do is go to your deploy.rb file if you're using Capistrano and add this bit of code. This is available in the documentation, so you could just copy and paste it from there, and I'll also add it to my show notes. So anyway, as you can see, after it symlinks the release directory file to the current one, then it just executes the whenever command, calling update cron tab with the name of your application as the identifier. So in this case, it will be store. So that way you can use it pretty much in every application, and then every time you deploy any application, those cron tabs will automatically be updated with whatever is inside of your schedule.rb file. So if you ever have the need to do some kind of recurring task, I highly recommend that you check out Whenever to manage your cron jobs. Sponsored in part by RubyMine, a Rails IDE from JetBrains. It provides smart code completion, Rails refactorings, version control integration, and more. For a free 30-day trial, visit jetbrains.com/Ruby. Also sponsored by Pragmatic Screencasts. They offer high-quality screencasts on a variety of subjects, including Ruby and Rails. Check them out at pragmatic.tv.